ACMi productions are only made possible with your support. Visit patreon.com/ACMi to learn how you can help.
Great. Well, it is 7:33 p.m. It is Tuesday, December 10th, 2024. Good evening. My name is Christian Klein. I'm the chair of the Arlington Zoning Board of Appeals, and I'm calling this meeting of the board to order. I'd first like to confirm all members and anticipated officials are present. From the Zoning Board of Appeals, we have Roger DuPont.
Here.
Patrick Hanlon.
Here.
Venkat Hawley.
Here.
Adam LeBlanc.
Here.
And Elaine Hoffman.
Here.
Welcome to you all. On behalf of the town, we have Colleen Ralston, our zoning assistant.
Here.
And we have with us Michael Cunningham, the town council.
Here.
Good to have you with us. And there's no one here appearing for 3822, which is 20 Pond Lane, but we'll get to that in a minute. So tonight's meeting of the Arlington Zoning Board of Appeals is being conducted remotely, consistent with the supplemental budget bill signed by Governor Healy on March 29, 2023, which extended temporary provisions pertaining to the open meeting law to March 31st, 2025. The extension of those provisions allows public bodies to hold their meetings remotely by providing live, adequate alternative means of public access to the deliberations. This meeting is being recorded and will be broadcast by ACMi. Members of the public who are participating by Zoom or who wish to offer public comment should be aware that they will be asked to provide their full name and address so that a complete public record of the meeting can be taken in accordance with state law. All participants of this meeting are advised that people may be listening to this meeting without offering public comment, and those people will not be required to identify themselves. Any votes that are taken this evening will be conducted by roll call. All supporting materials that have been provided members of this body are available on the town's website unless otherwise noted. Public is encouraged to follow along using the posted agenda, and as chair, I reserve the right to take items out of order in the interest of promoting an orderly meeting. So with that, I am going to our agenda. I'm going to skip to agenda item number 6, which is the public hearings. So the only public hearing before us this evening is docket 3822, 20 Pond Lane. The applicant in the only matter before the board has requested a continuance to January 14th, 2025 by letter. As there is no testimony to be presented this evening, we'll move directly on a vote to continue. So with that, I move to continue the public hearing for docket 3822, 20 Pond Lane to Tuesday, January 14th, 2025 at 7:30 p.m.
Second.
Thank you, Mr. Hanlon. So roll call vote of the board. Voting yes or no. Mr. DuPont.
Yes.
Mr. Hanlon.
Yes.
Mr. Hawley.
Yes.
Mr. LeBlanc.
Yes.
Ms. Hoffman.
Yes.
The chair votes yes. We are continued on 20 Pond Lane. So I'll bring us back up to item 2 on our agenda, which is an administrative item. These items relate to the operation of the board and as such will generally be conducted without input from the general public. Board will not take up any new business on prior hearings, nor will there be the introduction of any new information on matters previously brought before the board. So item 2 is the approval of the written decision for docket 3825, 15 West Street. This is a decision that was written by Mr. Hanlon, distributed to the board for questions and comments, and the final version posted to the board this afternoon. Are there any additional questions or comments in regards to the written decision for 15 West Street? Seeing none, I move that the Zoning Board of Appeals for the Town of Arlington approve and adopt the written decision in docket 3825, 15 West Street, which grants a special permit under sections 539A and 539B sub 6 in the zoning bylaw. Do I have a second?
Second.
And so roll call vote of the board, voting yes or no. Mr. DuPont.
Yes.
Mr. Hanlon.
Yes.
Mr. Hawley.
Yes.
Mr. LeBlanc.
Yes.
And Ms. Hoffman.
Yes.
Thank you all. That matter is passed. That brings us to item 3 on our agenda, the approval of the decision for docket 3826 for Intervale Road. This is a hearing that was heard at our previous meeting. The decision written by myself and Mr. Hanlon and submitted to the board for questions and comments. Final version posted to the board this afternoon. Are there any additional questions or comments in relation to the written decision for docket 3826 for Intervale Road? Seeing there, none. Excuse me. The chair moves that the Zoning Board of Appeals for the Town of Arlington approve and adopt the written decision in docket 3826 for Intervale Road, which grants a special permit under section 542B6 in the zoning bylaw.
second,
Thank you, Mr. Hanlon. So roll call vote of the board. Mr. Dupont.
yes.
Mr. Hanlon.
Yes.
Mr. Holly.
Yes.
Mr. LeBlanc.
Yes.
And Ms. Hoffman.
Yes.
Thank you all. That brings us to item 4 on our agenda this evening, approval of the decision for in docket 3827, 247 Wachusett Avenue. This is a decision hearing that was heard at our previous hearing. The decision was written by myself, distributed to the board for questions and comments. Final version posted to the board this afternoon. Are there any additional questions or comments in regards to the written decision for docket 3827, 247 Wachusett Avenue? Seeing none, the chair will move that the Zoning Board of Appeals for the Town of Arlington approve and adopt the written decision in docket 3827, 247 Wachusett Avenue, which grants a special permit under sections 539A and 539D in the zoning bylaw.
Second,
Thank you, Mr. Hanlon. So roll call vote of the members who voted. Mr. Dupont,
yes.
Mr. Hanlon,
Yes.
Mr. Holly,
Yes.
and Mr. LeBlanc.
Yes.
And the chair votes yes, that item is approved. That brings us to item number 5, which is discussion of possible zoning bylaw revisions. So I had emailed the board about this earlier. I've been invited to speak with the redevelopment board at their hearing this upcoming Monday in regards to topics that the board may want to consider for town meeting in the spring. The items that I had mentioned to them, the first was the revisions to our parking bylaws as they relate to residential districts. And that was one I had mentioned to them at the end of last year and asked them to take a look at this year. I have a sense that that may be moving on again to the following year. But there are pieces of that need some work. The other one that had come to mind was that our zoning bylaw, we talk about lot coverage when it comes to the table of dimensions, but that term is not defined. But we define the term building coverage, but we never use it. So I think it's something that the ARB should look at and see if we can clean that up so that it's clear what is actually included when we talk about lot coverage, if it is in fact building coverage or if it's something different. So those were the 2 things that I had identified. And so I had wanted to just take this opportunity to ask the board if they had any other items they had noted from our deliberations or from their own research and things in the zoning bylaw that they thought might be something that we should spend, either our board or specifically the redevelopment board should take some time looking at.
Mr. Chairman,
Mr. Hanlon.
one of the things that has given us trouble over the last couple of years has been the provision relating to the provision that relates to the number of driveways. The standards that they have there, we basically always ignore a couple of them because they hardly ever seem to apply. We then provide adequate transportation very broadly to include safety concerns. And that's what we primarily are interested in, our safety things. It is true that sometimes multiple entries onto a throughway create traffic friction where there's actually an interference with traffic. That generally doesn't happen on quiet residential streets. And so that's not usually directly an issue. It seems to me that it would be helpful to us to have a checklist of criteria or things to look at or whatever, however that should be done, or potentially findings that we have to make that would actually reflect sort of modern thinking on access to highways. And I know that John Alessi is really good at that sort of thing. He's the transportation coordinator in the planning department. And while I'm not necessarily hung up on having that happen in April, it seems to me it's something that ought to be put onto the put onto the agenda, and there's a lot of learning on this. So an expert in transportation could easily put together things and then meld them to the town's thing. But it would be really nice to have a set of criteria that really give us guidance rather than ones that just give us a hook to put an ad hoc analysis on.
Thank you, Mr. Hanlon. Any others from the board? Yes, then I would like to introduce to the board a past member of our board, current member of the redevelopment board, Steve Revlak, who's joining us this evening to talk a little bit about the zoning bylaws and what the ARB may be considering and questions that relate to us. So Steve, welcome.
So, good evening. I wasn't prepared to make a presentation. I know that one of the things that we will have to change in the, ideally in the next town meeting is the part of our bylaw that deals with accessory dwelling units to, get it to comply with state law. And apparently HLC is also, they also have draft regulations circulating. And the draft regulations were kind of instructive. I found them helpful in what we have to do. But anyway, this is something I'd started a conversation with Mr. Klein and Mr. Hanlon about. Mr. Hanlon's actually been good about reminding us that for the need to do this. The board had been contemplating a sort of revisiting the zoning in Arlington Heights, trying to put it all basically put it all under one district rather than having separate little districts with different use regulations and different dimensional regulations that change frequently. That may be postponed for another year. We'll have to see. And although it's not an ARB, there is one citizen petition to deal with an affordable housing overlay. There may be other citizen petitions as well. That's what I'm aware of at the moment, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. Do you want to just explain briefly what changes we do need to make to the ADU bylaw?
So there are at least two, possibly three. One item is that the state, both the law and the regulations prohibit an odor occupancy requirement. At present, we have a requirement for the owner to sign an affidavit at the time of the certificate of occupancy is issued, stating that they'll live in one of the two dwellings. It looks like state law would prohibit this. Number two is accessory dwelling units cannot have special permit requirements, and under some certain circumstances, we do, specifically if the ADU is within 6 feet of a lot line. The regulations have an interesting definition of single-family residential district. So it is a district in which single-family residential dwellings are allowed by right, by special permit, or by variance. So my casual reading, it would encompass the entirety of the R districts. So ideally, we would, have still stay with a uniform set of rules. And finally, there is a restriction regarding short-term rentals. The regulations say that municipalities can regulate the use of an ADU as a short-term rental, but not in excess of, they cite some state law and you say you can't conflict with it. And I'm sure this is a question that will be coming to Mr. Cunningham.
Great. Thank you, Steve. Are there any questions?
So I just have a follow-up for Steve. So effectively, that means even the restriction or the requirement of the special permit for structures within 6 feet of the lot line will be taken off our plate. So we won't be dealing with any of that anymore. So the ADU is just a matter of whatever happens at the building department at inspectional services.
That is my expectation, yes.
Okay.
So, Mr. Chairman,
Hanlon.
I wonder, the thing that is interesting is that once you decide that you can't do that ADUs and accessory buildings within 6 feet of a lot line can't be. Right now, what it says is that it's allowed only by a special permit in that situation. And so one way of thinking about it is that you can just eliminate the special permit and then they're not allowed at all. Or you could say, well, they're allowed anyway, even without a special permit. Or you could say they're allowed, but there may be some other criteria that would be enforced by the building department that would address this. And actually picking which way, what you do when you eliminate the special permit requirement is enormously important because it turns out that while that's maybe just a little tiny bit of the ADU bylaw, it's a really big part of what actually is happening on the ground. And I remember being in a program that was sponsored by the planning department last summer, and when I added it up, it was roughly half of all the ADUs in town have been coming through us because they're located within 6 feet of the lot line. And we have, as far as I can recall, never actually denied one of those. And in fact, we're quite famous for having approved a showcase one down on Dorothy that HCA did, which would not have been allowed if you didn't allow ADUs by special permit in a district. So it would be a really terrible thing to actually prohibit all or even functionally prohibit them if you wanted to add additional requirements that would make them difficult to do, because the ADUs are difficult in and of themselves. And I'd just like to put in a pitch for saying that, that what we really ought to be doing here is allowing to happen by right what is now happening by special permit, and that we shouldn't be taking in the new legislation, the intent of which is to expand ADU use and expand the right to do them as a way of cutting back on our bylaw. That we should at least not go back. I know that was not a very successful slogan nationwide recently, but it was successful in Massachusetts. And I'd like to encourage the ARB to think about that and to at least start with the proposition that all they're going to get rid of is the discretion, and for the rest of it, they should be preserving what it is that we in effect have been doing. And these special permits are not, they give rise sometimes to negotiations or working out problems, but they do not give rise to denials.
Thank you, Mr. Hanlon. The other thing that I wasn't sure about is if somebody has an existing house. So we have the case we recently had on Intervale where somebody has an existing home, they build an ADU in an addition that is greater than 750 square feet. Are we still allowed to enforce the large addition special permit, even if it is just for adding an accessory dwelling unit? And I'm not quite sure exactly how that would work, but we should consider what that might be.
I had not considered that technicality, so thank you, Mr. Chair, for bringing it up.
Absolutely. Any further questions about this items? All right. The only other item I had for the board this evening, just briefly, I had gotten an email from Matthew Maggiore, who's the manager of the Maggiore companies. They're building the 50-unit 40B project on Massachusetts Avenue. I had asked him for some updates just that I could give to the board before the end of the year. So he noted that the site utilities are complete, with the exception of the sewer connection, which has just been approved by the MWRA. The stormwater infiltration system is complete. The retaining wall at the rear is complete. And the urban garden area is complete to rough grade elevation. The balance of the work will follow in the spring. Building erection is complete to the 5th floor. Roof sheathing and wall sheathing and waterproofing are in progress. Roofing installation and membrane roofing will begin next week. Window installation and waterproofing will be following that. Plumbing, rough, fire protection, rough electrical boxing and layout is in progress. Basement slab and retail slab have been placed, and the garage slab will be coming in next week. So he says they're making great progress, and looking forward to continuing that. I'm trying to arrange just a visit to just take a look at their progress. If anyone from the board is interested in joining me for that, if you could just email me and let me know, and if we can line something up. Great. So we do not have a second meeting this month. Our next meeting will be on Tuesday, January 14th. And then we're following the normal schedule. We do have 3 items, now 4, with the continuation of Pond Lane on the agenda for the 14th. So that should be a good night. And I think that is everything on our agenda this evening. Just by member of the board that we do have an ethics training that's coming up immediately following this meeting. So we will be moving on to that. You have a separate link for that, and that'll be hosted by our town council, Michael Cunningham. So this being the end of the year, I thank everyone for a great year on the board. Appreciate everyone coming out, being a part of the board. Especially like to thank Elaine for sticking around for a little longer than I think she had wanted, but to make sure that the board has enough people on it to do all its business. I really appreciate that.
At this point, I'm nostalgic. I'm sad to see the end of it.
I'm working it really hard. And congratulations to Adam for being elevated to full board. And our best to Dan Riccatelli and his family as they move across the line over to Medford. And a special thanks to Colleen Ralston for everything she's done for us this entire year. It's been a great year. Very strongly because of your efforts to organize the board and the process for getting things to the board and after us. So I greatly appreciate all your efforts in that regard. It's been very, very helpful.
Mr. Chairman,
Mr. Hanlon.
just to add one thing to the pan to Colleen is that I've taken note of the number of times applicants before us as they leave and they thank us for our time. They thank Colleen for being wonderful. So that just goes to show where she stands in the overall scheme of things.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Thank you, guys.
You're very welcome.
Thank you.
Well, with that, I would like to thank you all for your participation in tonight's meeting of the Arlington Zoning Board of Appeals. Appreciate everyone's patience throughout the meeting, and I especially like to thank Colleen Ralston, Mike Cunningham for their assistance in preparing for and hosting our online meetings tonight. Please note the purpose of the board's recording of the meeting is to ensure the creation of an accurate record of its proceedings, and it is our understanding the recording made by ACMi will be available on demand at acmi.tv within the coming days. If anyone has comments or recommendations, please send them via email to zba@town.arlington.ma.us. That email address is also listed on the Zoning Board of Appeals website. And to conclude tonight's meeting, I would ask for a motion to adjourn.
So moved, Mr. Chairman.
Second,
Hanlon, thank you, Mr. DuPont. So vote of the board to adjourn, voting yes or no, Mr. DuPont.
yes.
Mr. Hanlon.
Yes.
Mr. Holly.
Yes.
Ms. Hoffman.
Yes.
Mr. LeBlanc.
Yes.
And the chair votes yes. We are adjourned. Thank you all for being with us. Happy holidays to all, and I'll see members of the
too.
board in about a minute and a half.
Thank you.
Take care, everyone.
See ya.
ACMi productions are only made possible with your support. Visit patreon.com/ACMi to learn how you can help.